Everyone has seen the same picture. A truck parked on a busy corner, a line stretching down the block, an owner leaning out the window handing over food with a grin, done by 2 p.m. It looks like the easiest business in the world. No landlord breathing down your neck, no 10-year lease, no giant staff to manage, just a vehicle, a menu, and a good parking spot. Nobody shows you the other side of that picture. The owner in that video was awake before sunrise. They were loading ingredients into a rented kitchen 2 hours before a single customer showed up. They'll spend their evening scrubbing grease traps because tomorrow's health inspection doesn't care how tired they are. And at the end of a genuinely strong month, after every bill is paid, they might clear somewhere in the low thousands. Today, we're going to walk through the real math of this business, not the highlight reel, the spreadsheet. Let's start with the truck itself. A used truck, already built out with a kitchen, already wrapped, already road legal, typically costs somewhere in the range of $40,000 to $90,000. That sounds almost reasonable, cheaper than a lot of new pickup trucks. But a used truck is cheap for a reason. The refrigeration unit is probably tired, the wiring may be outdated, the fire suppression system might be a decade old and no longer compliant with your city's current code. You usually find this out the hard way during your first inspection, when the health department hands you a list of fixes instead of a permit. A brand new custom build avoids most of those surprises, but it comes at a real cost. Often $80,000 to $200,000 depending on the size of the kitchen and the equipment inside. Most operators land somewhere in the middle. They buy a used chassis with a healthy engine, then gut and rebuild the kitchen themselves. By the time you add a proper generator, a code-compliant hood system, a 3-basin sink setup, exterior branding, and a point-of-sale system, that budget option usually settles around $90,000 to $140,000 in a major city. And that's before a single onion has been chopped. Now, come the permits. And this is where people usually underestimate everything. Opening a food truck means dealing with multiple government departments at once: business licensing, fire safety, health inspections, and parking authorization, each with its own fee and its own renewal schedule. Industry surveys of regulation-heavy cities put first-year compliance costs at roughly $25,000 to $30,000 once you add it all together. And that number doesn't include the invisible cost: the weeks lost waiting for a rescheduled inspection, or the back and forth with a health inspector who isn't satisfied with your wastewater tank. Some cities make this even harder. A handful cap the total number of mobile vending permits allowed citywide, and the waiting list can stretch decades, not years. Operators in that situation end up renting a permit from someone who's held one since before smartphones existed. An entirely separate line item nobody warns you about when you're dreaming about this business. And permits don't stop after year one. Between health fees, fire department renewals, commissary documentation, and legal filings, most operators pay somewhere between $500 and $1,400 every single month just to stay legal. Before fuel, before food, before payroll. Here's the part almost nobody mentions before they buy the truck. You're not allowed to operate as a standalone kitchen. In nearly every major city, food trucks are legally required to be based out of a commissary, a licensed commercial kitchen where you prep, store inventory, dump wastewater, refill clean water, and clean your equipment at the end of the night. That commissary isn't optional, and it isn't free. Rent typically runs $700 to $1,800 a month, arriving whether you had a great week or a terrible one. Commissaries also run on booked time blocks. You reserve your prep window days or weeks in advance. Show up late, and you're eating into your own prep time. Arrive to a double-booked kitchen, and you might miss your slot entirely, which means you're not ready when the lunch rush starts, and that rush is basically your entire business day. Speaking of the menu, this is where a lot of new owners quietly sabotage themselves. The instinct is always to build a big menu. More options feels like more appeal. In practice, every extra item multiplies your problems. More ingredients to store, more prep steps, more things that can go wrong under pressure during a 90-minute rush. A 12-item menu might look great online, but it means slower assembly, harder inventory forecasting, and more food quietly expiring in your fridge because it didn't sell fast enough. The trucks that actually make money almost always run lean. 4 to 6 core items, no more. That's not a creative limitation, it's a financial strategy. Fewer items means faster tickets, tighter inventory, and a kitchen line where nobody's reaching over anybody else. The other quiet decision that determines your margin is ingredient balance. A premium protein, a smoked brisket, a fresh-caught fish taco often carries a raw food cost of 35 to 45% of the sale price. Build a menu entirely around items like that, and your margins collapse. The trucks that manage this well pair an expensive hero item with cheap, high-margin sides, fries, rice, a soda, where raw cost sits closer to 10 to 15% of the price. The sides quietly carry the truck. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to keep the thing running month after month. Fuel is the obvious one, both for driving the truck and for the generator powering your equipment for 6+ hours a day. Combined, that's usually $400 to $1,000 a month, plus another couple hundred for propane. Insurance is mandatory and comes in at least 3 separate forms: commercial auto, general liability, and equipment coverage, adding up to roughly $250 to $550 a month. Maintenance on a heavy commercial vehicle running a kitchen inside, it isn't optional either. Budget several $100s a month for routine upkeep and be ready for the week. Something actually breaks. A compressor, a transmission, a generator, which can wipe out $3,000 to $6,000 in a single hit. Add point-of-sale subscriptions and data plans and total fixed monthly overhead, before food, before wages, before rent to yourself, typically lands between $3,000 and $6,000. So what does a single $14 meal actually leave you? Sales tax takes roughly 8% off the top, leaving about $12.90. Food cost at a well-run 30% takes another $4.20, down to $8.70. Packaging, the box, napkins, sauce cups, costs another 60 to 70 cents. Card processing fees take another 45 to 50 cents. And labor, once you account for a real hourly wage and payroll taxes, eats another $2 to $2.50 per ticket. What's actually left as contribution margin toward your fixed costs? Somewhere around $5 per ticket. If your monthly overhead sits at $5,000, that means you need to sell close to 1,000 meals a month just to break even, about 30 a day, 6 days a week, before you've paid yourself anything at all. And then there's the part you can't control, the clock and the weather. In a typical downtown lunch spot, 60 to 70% of an entire day's revenue happens inside a single 90-minute window. Everything else is prep or cleanup. Inside that window, speed is everything. Shave 30 seconds off your average ticket time, and you can serve dozens more customers before the rush ends. Miss that window and there's no second chance until tomorrow. Weather makes it worse. A heavy rain event can cut street traffic by 70 to 90%. Extreme heat drops walk-up traffic by 40 to 60%, while simultaneously stressing your refrigeration and your staff. Winter is its own season entirely. Cities in colder climates often see a 40 to 60% drop in street revenue between late fall and early spring, while every fixed cost, insurance, commissary rent, loan payments, keeps arriving exactly on schedule. What about catering and festivals? The real money, right? Festivals can generate genuinely large single weekend revenue, sometimes $5,000 to $15,000. But event organizers usually charge a flat entry fee plus a revenue share of 15 to 25%. And if the weekend gets rained out, you've already bought the inventory and paid the fee. Corporate catering is the more stable option. A fixed headcount, a prepaid deposit, no weather risk. And it's often the highest margin channel available, sometimes reaching 25 to 30% net. So what does a realistic year actually look like? In a strong month, gross revenue might hit $30,000 to $35,000. After food cost, labor, overhead, and loan payments, net profit might land around $5,000 to $7,000. Annualized, that math implies close to $70,000 to $80,000 a year. But real life doesn't give you 12 strong months in a row. Between slow winters, rainouts, and unexpected repairs, most operators land closer to $40,000 to $55,000 a year in actual take-home income. Industry-wide data backs this up. The average food truck brings in a bit over $300,000 in annual gross revenue, but at typical net margins of 6 to 9%, that translates to somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000 in real annual profit for the average operator. The people who beat that average share a pattern. They kept debt low, built a catering pipeline before they needed it, ran a tight 4 to 6 item menu, and treated maintenance as a routine cost instead of an emergency. The ones who struggle usually made the opposite choices: too much truck, too much debt, too big a menu, and no cash reserve for the slow months that always come. A food truck isn't a shortcut into the restaurant business. It's the whole business, comprised into 18 feet of steel, running on a 2-hour window each day, with the weather holding a vote on how well it goes. Understand that going in, and you have a real shot at making the numbers work.